Hi everyone, and thank you for joining me tonight. As we do on every Monday night, I read from my memoir, Can These Bones Live Again? Walking Through the Eyes of the Broken. I encourage you to purchase this book. I promise you that it's going to touch on something, whether spiritually, emotionally, or physically, that you can relate to. It's available on Amazon.com. The link to purchase the book is in the description below. I'm going to start out by reading a few reviews that I've received this week, and then I'm going to get right into the reading for tonight. The first testimony says, "Hi Kim, I'm so glad to have read your book. I must say it was open and honest. Your words were a godsend to anyone who reads your book. They will come away breathing a sigh of relief because of the honesty and openness. They can see themselves one way or another. We all have pain that we need to let go of. Thank you, and thank God for your insight to help others." And that comes from LP in Walnut Cove, North Carolina. The next review really touches on, it actually talks about some of the things I wrote about in the book, but I just ask that you bear with me because I really like this testimonial or review. And she was really personal, so I'm going to read that to you now. "Hello, Kimberly. Oh my God, where do I begin? Your book was so inspirational to me in so many ways, on so many levels. Although I never met or got to know you personally, I do know some of your family. Your book made me think, remember, cry, and be thankful. There's not enough space for me to explain how your book touched me spiritually, emotionally, and physically. I got to the part of when the man knocked on your door and you did not know him, but you let him in to talk. When he told you that God had sent him to you after what he told you about yourself, I began to cry. I cried because I believed everything he said to you. I cried because I could feel your pain through your struggles. I could feel your pain for your friend that committed suicide. I've been to that side of my suffering, and sometimes I'm sorry to say, I also thought that would be a way out for me. I never did it because I could hear God say, wait one more hour, one more day, 1 week, 1 month, or 1 year. Some things got better, some got worse. Right now I'm still suffering with the burning pain in my back, which had progressed to the middle and bottom of my spine. I have nerve pain in my foot from the amputation, and my left hip is now affected because I walk with a limp and have to use a cane. Even after all that I've been through, I was and still am grateful that I can still walk. Somewhere inside me there's a story to tell as well, but I want you to know that your book has truly inspired me to keep going, to fight through my pain and never give up. I wish that I could see you in person just to talk, but please know that you can believe that if your book does nothing for anyone else, which I don't believe, I think it would help a lot of people. It has truly and honestly helped me. And that comes from NG, also from Walnut Cove, North Carolina. And the last review is also from Walnut Cove, North Carolina, but it reads, "This is a job well done. The dedication is special. The dedication is special to me. It is humbling and loving. The introduction is breathtaking. It lets you know that there is a story to be told. I want to personally thank you for sharing your story. It is heartwarming and heartbreaking, yet filled with such compassion and emotion. This book opened up so many doors and chapters of my life, some I wanted to forget. In fact, you touched on so many things that I could relate to. It was crazy. Things no one knows but me and God. I'm so very proud of you for having the courage to stand and tell your story. It is a job well done. I just started reading it again for the second time." This comes from SM from Walnut Cove, North Carolina. And before I go into the reading, just to let you know about a few dates that's coming up. On April the 14th, we will actually have the official book release here in Raleigh, North Carolina. That's going to be from 3:30 to 5:30 at Authors and Art Studio at 3303 Suite 103 Rock Quarry Road. And then on April the 20th through the 21st, I'll be in Myrtle Beach and Conway, South Carolina. April the 28th, I'll be in Greenville, North Carolina. And then on April the 29th, I'll be at the Lord's Church Worship Center for their Friends and Family Day. And these are all going to be book signings and book workshops and things of that nature. So to get into tonight's reading, we're reading from chapter 5 tonight. Gosh, there's only one more chapter after this, so we'll be finished in another week. But I'm going to start now. I had this overwhelming sense of sadness that always lurked below the surface. Most people never knew it was there. I spent so many years in middle and high school hiding my true feelings and thoughts that it was easy for a while. It was getting harder and harder for me to keep up the facade. I was actually afraid to cry back then. I believed that if I shed one tear for any reason, I would never stop crying. The floodgates would open from all my wounds and I would drown in my own tears. So I turned off as much emotion as I could. I was cold and emotionless. I knew I was cold, but I also knew that being anything other than cold left me vulnerable and exposed. I couldn't risk it showing any emotion, so I turned off as much emotion as possible. More than one guy I dated back then told me I was cold. They didn't actually say the word cold, but I believe that's what they meant. This one guy named Steve told me, "Kim, I never know how you feel about anything. No matter what I say or do, you don't seem to care one way or the other." My response was, "That's not true." But that was all I said. I didn't elaborate or explain. He sat quietly waiting for me to continue. When I didn't say anything else, he raised his hands up in frustration and said, "That's exactly what I mean. You don't care about me or anything else." I did care, but I didn't know how to express it. I was so afraid of being abandoned that I refused to let anyone close to me. I didn't know much about cars, but I knew enough to know that my car engine had blown. I stood there in shocked disbelief. I was barely staying afloat. There was no way I could get an engine fixed. I had no resources to tap into and no one to ask for assistance. I got back in the car and slowly drove towards home. I prayed that I would make it there. Once I got home, I walked up the steps towards my apartment slowly. I felt like I drug 50-pound weights on my legs. Once inside, I walked straight to my bedroom and lay down on the bed. I wasn't crying. I wasn't praying. I just lay there, completely numb. I felt void of everything. I felt like I had tried my entire life, but whatever I did failed miserably. I failed to become an undergraduate in high school. I failed to graduate college, and now I was failing at life. I didn't want to be here anymore. I wasn't suicidal. I wished I could get in my car and drive away and never look back. Funny thing was, I didn't have a working car any longer. Lying on the bed that day, I knew I was in a dangerous place. I had never been afraid to die. Death to me always felt like there was some peace. I wasn't planning my death, but I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to slit my wrist or shoot myself, but I didn't want to be here. That's a dangerous place. I knew feeling that way could lead to me doing something I couldn't take back. I was scared for me. The next section I'm going to read starts. He dropped all of his flyers on the breezeway and stood there looking like he was in shock. He stared at me with a grimace on his face. He looked as if he was about to cry. He finally gathered himself and said, "I can't believe it's you." I didn't know what he was talking about. I didn't know that man. He then said, "I've been dreaming about you for months. Can I come inside? God sent me here for you today. I have something to tell you." Huh? What? Now I was the one looking like I was about to cry. I had just finished asking God to please help me, and now someone was standing at my door saying God sent him to me. I opened the door to let him in. He asked for a glass of water. I shook as I handed him the glass. He sat down on the love seat in a small living room. I sat directly across from him on the sofa. He just sat there at first trying to gather himself. He was in as much shock as me. I was completely on edge. Who was this stranger I just allowed into my house, and what was this message from God? First, he asked me if we could pray. I obliged. We both needed a word of prayer at that moment. After what seemed like forever, he started to talk. He shook as he began to tell me the story of how he started dreaming about a young woman he didn't know, but that God was sending him to save her. He talked about the great sadness that surrounded me. What he said next made me burst into tears. He said, God wants you to know that he heard you every time you prayed, Kimberly. God was with you all the time. You just didn't feel him. You are a very special person, but your life has been so hard that you felt like you did something wrong. You felt like you were being punished. God wants you to know you are not being punished. He wants you to know that you have favor. In that moment, God told me to go comfort her. I said to God, you think you're funny. You know she doesn't like me. If she hits me, this is your fault. This, meaning the fight that would follow. My brother's speech from the first day of school is still very much a part of me. I don't let anybody hit me. I walked over to Carmen, and without saying anything, I wrapped both my arms around her from behind. She was sitting down at a table in the training room. I rocked her the way a mother would rock her child. I comforted her the best I could. I told her we would get through this and that everything would be okay. I didn't know if that was true, but I needed to believe that, and she needed to hear it. I continued to rock her until she stopped crying. I rubbed her head and said as I turned to leave, we will get through this. We never looked at each other's face. The trainer came back in the room along with everyone else and announced that the bank was closing early and would be closed the next day as well. There were valid security reasons for this particular location to close that day, so we all left. Carmen nor I ever mentioned that day. A year or so later, I was sitting at my desk when I felt someone standing behind me. I turned to see Carmen. She nervously wrung her hands together. I flatly said, "What is it, Carmen?" thinking it was something work-related and that she just didn't want to ask me. I had lost all patience with the childish, immature women. She said, "Kim, I want to apologize to you." "For what, Carmen?" I hadn't thought anything else about that day, mostly because I had blocked that whole day out of my mind. I stopped watching the news in 2001 and never resumed. The constant replays caused real emotional depression for me, so I turned the news off. What he said didn't make me mad. I felt embarrassed. I was a 25-year-old woman and didn't know the basic things about being a woman. No one had taught me anything. He saw the embarrassment on my face and came to sit down beside me on the bed. He took the pantyhose out of my hand and began to show me how to put them on. He put my hose on completely and then walked around my room, demonstrating the design and benefits of wearing hose. It was hilarious. Did I mention he was one of the funniest people I have ever known? He always made me laugh until my belly hurt. E knocked on the bedroom door and asked why we were laughing. Shambi put his hand over my mouth and begged me not to say anything. That just made me laugh even harder. We finally both said in unison, nothing, but we continued to giggle. He taught me about how people get scammed in the city. He taught me what to do and what not to do when visiting any large city. He lived in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and knew more about the streets than anyone I knew. He was very intelligent and very smart. He was also very sad. His heart hurt just as much, if not more, than mine. We shared many days of just talking about life. Talking to him and unearthing some of my secrets helped me to begin the healing process. I didn't know him, not really, and he didn't know me. we could be completely honest with each other. When I woke up, I knew what I was going to teach was based on my life experiences. I knew that my physical pain wasn't an attack against me. It was designed for me so that I could help others. It was my purpose. Romans 5 verses 3 through 5 tells us, I'm paraphrasing, that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance produces character. Character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame because we have hope in Jesus. From that day, I started learning everything I could about pain management, mental and spiritual well-being, and complementary and alternative pain management. We are a whole being, physical, spiritual, and mental. When dealing with pain and disease, we need to address the person as a whole, not fractured pieces. As long as we just treat one or the other, people will continue to suffer. Every time my knees got worse or I needed another surgery, I asked God, what do you want for me to learn from this? How can I use this to help someone else? I didn't always understand, but I kept telling God, I trust you with me. Now I give talks to chronic pain sufferers about physical, spiritual, and emotional healing. Because of my life experiences, I have a level of knowledge and expertise that no book can ever teach. I still haven't given my seminar or talk in a church, but God and spirituality are such a big part of it that it's like going to church. I frequently hear amens from the audience when I give talks. My life was my lesson. I wonder how my life would differ if I had answered the call then. Honestly, there's no need for me to wonder. God knew when he gave me the vision I wouldn't answer. He knows everything about me. Jeremiah 1:15 says, I knew you before you were formed in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart and appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Nothing about me is a surprise to God. Nothing about him is a surprise to me now. Every time I call him, he answers. And that is just a few sections from tonight's reading. I hope you all enjoyed it. Again, the link to purchase my memoir is in the description below. Guys, have a great night. I love you.